This is New Year's Eve, 2020. This is the night when we go from 2020 to 2021. This is my grandson. This is John Olson, John Thomas Olson. And John is going to soon turn 12 years old. I'm his grandfather. I'm John Sutherland Marsh Jr. is my full name. And we're visiting the Olsons here in Kansas City. And we've been playing a game at dinner every night this week during this visit, where John pulls out a series of questions out of a box. And so we've had some very interesting discussions with John and his parents, and then with his grandmother and I. And so John just pulled out a card, and the question on the card was what, John?
What's the history of your name?
What is the history of your name? Well, it turns out that we have quite a surprise for John, which we've been planning for a very long time, and we think that it was, God finally said, listen, this is the time to show him the surprise. And so what God did is he made sure John pulled out that card. What is the history of your name? So John, we're going to tell you about the history of your name, and then we're going to give you something that is very important to our family. And we're going to carry on a family tradition tonight that started 100 years ago. All right? Mm-hmm. So where did you get your name? Well, your last name comes from your father, Olson, right? And what generally happens in our society is that we get our last names from our fathers, generally. Mm-hmm. And then when women marry, generally they take the last name of their husbands, not always. But in your case, that's what happened. So when your mother married your father, she took the last name of Olson, and then also all the children in this family have the last name of Olson. But your first name and your middle name have a different significance, right? Mm-hmm. So you are named immediately after your two grandfathers. So Thomas Olson, your mm-hmm. grandfather Olson, that Thomas is your middle name, and then John is your first name, and so that is my name. And so we want to talk to you about your first name, about John, because John is a name that has been used both in the Olson family going back for generations, and certainly in the Marsh family going back many generations. And your dad can tell you, your dad and your grandfather Olson can tell you the stories about other John Olsons going back, and other Johns who had other last names but are related to you on your father's side of the family. But what I'm going to do tonight is tell you about the Johns on my side of the family, and with the origin, as far as we can tell, who was the first John in my family, all right? And so we can sort of trace that name John has been passed down from one generation to another. So I've done some research, and the first John that I can find in my family, his name was John Sutherland. And John Sutherland was born in Thurso, Scotland. He immigrated to the United States in 1869, and then lived in New York City until his death in about 1916. So that's John Sutherland. He is my great grandfather. All right. So he had a son who he named John as well. And as often happened at that time, the child did not survive to adulthood, but died at a fairly young age. So there was John Sutherland and then his son, but he passed away. But the younger John Sutherland had a sister, and that sister is my grandmother, and at birth she was called Catherine Sutherland. All right, so that would be my grandmother. And when she got married, she married Norman Marsh, and so she became Catherine Sutherland Marsh. And when their first son was born, they decided to name him after her father, right? So he became John Sutherland Marsh. Well, that was so John Sutherland Marsh is my grandfather. So the name John is passed on. You see how it's passed down from one generation to the next? Mm-hmm. And my father was born in New York City, in the Bronx, in 1908. And then when he was about 12 years old, he and his sister and his parents moved to Western New York, to Niagara Falls, New York. And this would have been about 1920. And I don't know if this was an idea of his parents or who it was in the family, but when my father turned 12 years old, he was given a ring. And the ring had his initials on it. So John Sutherland Marsh. The initials on the ring were JSM, right? So think about that. As a 12-year-old boy, he was given this beautiful gold ring, which he wore for many, many years, from the time he was 12. And then in 1949, John Sutherland Marsh and his wife, her name was Muriel. You're familiar with that name. Mm-hmm. John Sutherland Marsh and Muriel had a baby boy in 1949. That was me, right? Mm-hmm. And my name is John Sutherland Marsh Jr., but they called me Jack to distinguish me between my father and me. And so that name John continues to be passed down. So then I had the name John, and when I turned 12 years old, I had the same initials as my father, so he gave me that ring with the initials JSM, right? So Grandma and I, we didn't have any sons, so the name John, we couldn't, we weren't going to name your mom or your aunt John, right? Mm-hmm. So we skipped a generation there, and then when your mother and father, when you were born, they decided to carry on the name of the two grandfathers, John and Thomas. And so we thought it would be wonderful to be able to carry on the tradition of passing on this ring from my father in 1920 to me when I turned 12 in 1961, to you in 2021 as you are about to turn 12 years old. But there's a problem. The problem is that the initials JSM don't work for you, do they? Mm-mm. Because what are your initials?
JTO.
JTO, John Thomas Olson. So what we did, John, is we went to a jeweler, all right? And we took that original ring and we had them melt down that ring and recast a new ring that made from that same gold in the same style, the same size, and instead of JSM on that ring, there are the initials JTO. So what we're doing tonight is we're carrying on a family tradition that started 100 years ago. As the John turns 12 years old, he's given a ring. And so maybe if you have a son, or if your brothers have a son, and maybe this is something that when one of the boys of the next generation turns 12 years old, you want to continue this on. But this is your ring, and you can decide what you want to do with it. All right. Mm-hmm. So what we're going to do, John, is we're going to present you with this ring. So this is made from the same gold of that ring that was given to my father 100 years ago, that was then given to me in 1961. And so now, as we are entering 2021 and you're about to turn 12 years old, the ring passes to you. So this is the ring, John, and you can see it's very fancy script on there. You see, it has JTO on it. All right, and it's the exact same style ring as the original ring made 100 years ago, but It's larger now because over time the original ring got worn down. So we had to make it thick like it would have been 100 years ago. So you can, it is sized now to go on this finger. And then as you grow, you can move it to that finger and even that finger. And then when you're fully grown, you can have this resized, made larger, and it can go on your proper ring finger. All right? So you want to try it on?
Sure.
So see how it fits on that ring finger. Is that too small? Does that feels good right there now?
Yeah.
Okay. So what do you think of this family tradition?
It's interesting. It's different than I've ever heard of.
So John was a little bit, tonight when we said we had a surprise for him and we paused the game, he said, "What is going on?" And we said, well, we never imagined that was the question that was going to come up in the game tonight. What's the history of your name? But you now have learned about not only about the history of your name, but we are by giving you this ring, we're honoring all the previous generations in our family and those who had the name John. And really not only including those on my side of the family, but your father's side of the family as well, because your father's grandfather, his first name was John as well. All right?
That's crazy.
All right. And that's the story of the ring that now belongs to John Thomas Olson.
Thank you.